Hello and welcome to episode 182 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How are we doing?
I'm good, Andy. I will apologise. I'm slightly nasally this week. I don't know if it's a cold or hay fever. I've had it for the whole week, and I know that can be slightly distracting when you're listening to a podcast. You'll get used to it. I've had to get used to it this week. So Andy will expertly edit out any sniffs, coughs, or nose blowing, so it will seem incredibly smooth. But I'm good, Andy, actually. It's been a very good week, and we'll come on to, but we broke the £5,000 barrier on our Crohn's charity drive. So I am incredibly thankful and happy about that, but I'll come on to that in a second. But how was your week, Andy? How have you been?
My week's been good. I've been enjoying the World Cup and not really much else, to be honest. Although, talking of sporting exploits, I did watch my daughter in her first ever competitive netball match. And I'm glad I took 2 hours out of my working day to go along to the school to watch her keep the time and blow the whistle when the game started and stopped. So, she really was part of the team there. I was reliably informed that she would be used in the fourth quarter, and that's exactly what happened. She did get onto the pitch in the fourth quarter. Is it a pitch? No, it's a court, isn't it? A netball court. She played wing defence, and she touched the ball once, and that was when the ball rebounded, hit someone else, and it hit her knee. So she did really well. I'm not going to be one of those competitive parents. I'm just happy that she's keen and wanting to do this kind of thing. I noticed your daughter's good at football, Damien. I saw an update.
She's going to St George's Park, I think it's called. It's the England training academy area they have. Their sort of very expensive multi-million pound setup they have for the England team. And she's actually been, her football team that's local to here that she's part of, she's only 8. And they've been asked to go and represent the county in a football tournament. So that's been brilliant. I mean, she loves it. I'm not a pushy dad. She got into football because the FA, people may remember, the FA are doing free courses. Look out if you have a daughter. I don't know if they're doing it for boys, but they're definitely doing it for girls to encourage more girls into football. They pay for clubs to offer free access to football for girls. So at this point, we've paid hardly any money. She's been into football for probably about 10 months, and now is getting into a team. And it's been brilliant. I just asked her if she wanted to go, and she went and she loved it. And she's only just now getting into watching football. So there's lots out there. There's some really great initiatives. So if you do have a daughter who might like football, just basically think of a team sport, not trying to be a pushy parent that football is best or anything. And she loves it. And the wonderful thing that the coaches say about the girls' football, which goes back to what you said, Andy, is that they say with the girls' football, the girls are there because they love it. They're enjoying it, not being pushed to go. And you can see how much they're enjoying it, and the camaraderie, and the parents on the touchline are far, far more jovial, and there's less of this. Basically, the parents spoil a lot of the boys' football that goes on out there, and fights and stuff like that. You don't seem to get that in girls' football so much, and I like it. So anyway, so that's coming up. We're doing that next week. Next weekend, we're going to be going up there and watching her do that. So like you, I just wanted to have fun. I don't want it to become too competitive or anything. It's just to have fun, because you can't win all the time, and it's to do your best, isn't it, Andy?
It is. It really is. It was genuinely quite emotional watching her, because she's never taken any real interest in sport. She's tried dance before. She loves dance, but she always freezes on the main stage. She likes to dance with other people, but she doesn't like to do it in front of other people. So she gets a little bit scared, bless her. So it was a real step forward to see her take part in this tournament where there were lots of people on the sidelines, and she came home super proud. So that's all you want as a parent, that your child is happy. Anyway, enough of the parenting advice.
Yeah, well, I would just say, before we move on, I know the rules of netball inside and out. I spent my younger years following my sisters around the country, it felt like, when they played netball. So, because they used to play netball and represent counties and things. It was fascinating anyway. Could be very aggressive, I have to say. But anyway, on with the podcast now. I mentioned earlier that we broke the £5,000 barrier on our Crohn's fundraising, where Justin and I did the 10k walk for Crohn's and Colitis UK, the charity that helps people with IBD. And we broke our initial target, which was £2,000, and we matched. It got us to 4. But then as the time went by, we were still receiving donations. And then I gave a bit of a challenge to see if we could push the amount over £5,000. And you guys responded. And I, just as Andy promised, I just want to read out a few thank yous from people who did donate in the last week. And now I know there were people who donated who listened to this podcast previously, and I'm going to look into ways of how I can respond individually to people via just giving, if it's possible, to say thank you. But otherwise, thank you to all those people. But a quick roundup, as we promised we would. I'd like to thank Phil P. He left his name. He said thanks Damien and good luck. There was Maddie Rose K. I don't know how you say it. Hi Damien, love the podcast and thank you so much for doing good in this world. Thank you for making financial information accessible to the masses. Keep it up. This is the message they left alongside their donations. There was some quite mind-blowing donation. Tudor Richards, great work, Damien. Delighted to support your very worthy cause with a quite mind-blowing £100 donation. And there was John, who's an expat living in Singapore. Andy, we are truly a global sensation, it would seem. Keep up the great work on the podcast, regular listener. And before that, Jonathan Price, podcast listener, please keep doing what you're doing with the podcast. You're really helping others help themselves. So, yeah, they were some of the ones we had on the podcast, just related to the podcast. So thank you all. I'm immensely proud of all that you've done and that we've done. So, on with the things we're covering this week, Andy. Now, there are 3 things, there may be 4, but 3 key things we're covering. Investing, but what happens when a company goes bust? More importantly, a broker or platform. Now, there is the idea that your money is ring-fenced. I want to explain something to people that came to light very recently. A good example why your money may be at risk, even if you think it isn't. I then want to go on to a topic that I lit a firework under Twitter this week. It was off the back of some research about the hourly rates, that the charges that advisors apply. And it was very interesting. And if you ever want to have advice, or you have advice now, it talks about how much you should be typically charged, what the average in the industry is. And it's very difficult to find that information because most advisors do not publish it. Finally, I want to talk about a piece, which is quite comical actually, about why you shouldn't put comical references on your bank statement. So, when you pay money to a friend, I've had a friend who did it to me once, who owed me money, paid money to me and put sex toys as the reference. Now I'm going to explain why that might not be a clever idea, even as a joke between friends.
I've done it myself for other people. Normally sort of lewd magazine subscriptions, but yeah.
So as a joke between friends, it may not be the best idea, and I might just pick up something on interest rates we did last week. So, conscious of the time, let's kick off, Andy. Let's kick off with the slightly more complex story. Platforms. Now, there was a story in the press recently, it's ongoing, but a company called Beaufort Securities, so they're a broker. So you imagine that you buy, sell shares, funds, you normally have a platform or a broker of some kind. You do it through them. Now, they collapsed in March this year, and as a result, there was appointed an administrator. An administrator in this case was PwC, which is one of the big, I think there's 4 accountancy firms, the big ones that are out there, and they had to go in there and pick through the debris and work out what's going on and try and regain assets and dish them out, etc. So when a platform goes bust, or a broker goes bust in this case, then what normally happens is you're told that your money is ring-fenced from the money of the broker. So if there were people in there that had people who had millions invested through them, or it might be less, but this could be their life savings. Now you're told that it goes into a custodian account, it's ring fenced, so in the event that your broker goes to the wall, you should be okay because the money is ring fenced. Now, what happened in this case was something very interesting, because PwC went in there and they went, right, the cost for us to sort this mess out is £100 million. Now, that's a lot. So the rules were changed in the aftermath of the financial crisis to allow the administrators to apply the cost, to take it from the assets of the people who have been impacted. So if your money was ring-fenced, in this instance, that £100 million bill could be taken partly from the ring fence money. So that means, if you think about it, when people tell you, don't worry, you invest through us, your money's safe, because if we go bust, the money is ring fenced, so it's in this custodian account. Now the rules show that it can actually be accessed by the administrator and used to sort out the administration process and to return assets to the rightful people. Now, the problem is there's no law or rule to stipulate how big or how little that bill can be. So what we were looking at in the case of Beaufort Securities, you could go and Google the story. There's some coverage in the Times, but there wasn't enough, I don't think, in the mainstream industry to show people that it meant that there were people looking at potentially a 40% write-down on the value of the stocks, shares, funds that they had through this broker as a result of this rule change. Now, there are people going, hold on, but now the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, shouldn't that be stepping in and helping out? Now, there are two versions of this scheme, really. There is one where your savings will be protected up to £85,000 per person, per institution. So that'd be per banking licence. So if you're a person and you had an account with First Direct, you'd be protected up to £85,000. But if you had one of HSBC, it's all the same banking licence and group. You had more money than £85,000 with them, then actually you would still only have one single £85,000 limit that FSCS would give you. So that's a danger. So you have to make sure your money is put with different banking institutions if you want to be fully covered and not take any risk. You want to be fully covered by that compensation scheme. One other way is you have a joint account. Then a joint account, you get double the protection. So you get a scenario, that's why people want to know who owns which brand, because if you have a lot of money, you won't necessarily want to put all your money with First Direct and HSBC because you only get one limit applied. Now, put that to one side, investing has a £50,000 limit. It's very different. So in this instance, what would have occurred for those people with Beaufort Securities, they would have been able to apply for up to £50,000 worth of compensation to cover the losses that were incurred through the administration costs of PwC. Well, if you've had money that's way in excess of that and your share of the losses are more than £50,000, well, you're kind of screwed. So you are going to have a loss impacted. So the moral of this story is to realise that the ring fencing isn't watertight. So how do you get around this? What is the solution? The solution would be to put your money with different platforms, different brokers, and split it around so you don't have more than £50,000 with each. That isn't generally that realistic and
or practical, I suppose.
Or practical, Andy. And even from personal, I know with family experience, you won't necessarily do that because you start duplicating costs as well for running money, because you're going to have multiple platform fees and administration charges. So if you are concerned, that's one way to get around it, is to move your money about. The other problem, though, with the Beaufort situation is the money was in limbo. So even if you did that, they are still trying to work out where some money is, and some people are locked out of their accounts while they try and sort out the whole issue anyway. So that wouldn't resolve this fact. There are people who won't be able to get into their accounts probably till September. Now, if you listen to this podcast in the future, we're talking about it's June now. That's quite a long way away. And the whole Beaufort thing came around because they were actually being investigated by the FBI for a £50 million money laundering claim. And it even involved a Picasso painting. This is how bizarre these things can become. So we are still in a situation where this broker, the people involved with it, customers, are still in limbo. They are apparently now, they're saying that PwC have reduced their level of costs. Why they've done that, I do not know, but the costs are going to be lower. So they actually reckon that most customers now will get their money back, or will have the losses that would be applied to their funds would be covered under the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, which is obviously good news. But this is just a big sort of FYI out there, that there are problems when you put your money with one broker. It's something you have to be aware of. It's difficult to mitigate. You can do it, but you have to be aware of it. And it's about risk. And if people are aware of the risks and they're happy with the risks that could be in a very unusual situation, you have to say this is unusual, then they are aware of them. But the problem is that there are a lot of people, nearly all of them involved in this situation, weren't aware that this could happen. And I think what the solution really is for the rules to be changed. Now, hopefully, there will be people will look at this and see that the money that shouldn't be applied, the administration's costs, there should be something that changes it so people don't lose out as a result of trying to fix a mess, because otherwise the ring fencing doesn't really mean a hell of a lot. So there we go, Andy. That's the end of the piece on Beaufort Securities.
Good stuff. Damien, so you caused another Twitter storm with your comments surrounding advisor charges and fees. What happened and what have we got?
Right. It's a bit of a Twitter debate, and I mean, I do this for the consumer. I look at everything from a consumer's angle, like the people who listen to this podcast. Now, there are a lot of people who listen to this podcast who work in the industry, and they've got a very defensive stance. They think my stance is, I don't like advisors. I think they're all crooks. And I've had people, go look at the Twitter stream, you'll see people who listen to this podcast say, Damien, you've got to change your views. They misinterpret my views totally. I am from the industry, okay? I know the value that advisors can add. I also know the value that they don't always add. I also know how much advice should cost. I also know what the equivalent of overcharging is. I want the best for both worlds. I want people, that's not true. I want the best for the consumer. Okay, so that can also be good for the advisor. The advisor community thinks they can operate in this world where this is how we do things, and consumers have to accept it. No, that's got to change. They're very defensive. Now, I've got to start with what caused the storm, and it's a very interesting piece of research that was carried out by a company called Vouched For. Now, Vouched For think of them as kind of a version of TripAdvisor for the financial advice world. You can go on their website, put in your postcode, and then you can find advisors near you, financial advisors, mortgage advisors, even solicitors and accountants, and you can see what their rating is by their customers or what their clients think of them, and then you can find out more information and you can screen them. I like it. It's a good idea, and it's a different model to some of the others out there. And that's empowering consumers, but they have actually recently changed it. They only used to have independent financial advisors on there. They've now weakened that and to now allow restricted advisors, which isn't necessarily a problem. It just means that some advisors have specialisms or they don't advise on the whole of the market. Now, there was a storm that Paul Lewis said you should never speak to a restricted advisor. I think that isn't a line that I take. I think you have to understand the difference, and you have to understand what you're going for and to shop around, because just because you don't look at the most esoteric solution out there, that could make you technically restricted. You can advise and are willing to look at 99.9% of the market for a client, but the 0.1 will start to push you down being a restricted route. And also the unrestricted, the fully independent advisors, if they end up having a document which says that they've looked at all these things, have discounted them for most of their clients, that still makes them independent, but in my eyes that makes them restricted. So it's a grey area that needs sorting out. But Vouched For quite simply have pretty much the full market, as much as you can get. And they have now added a feature where they're asking advisors to disclose their fees. And now 423 advisors have done this on their site. So it's in their interest to do it. The thing is, most advisors do not disclose their fees and charges on their website. And the problem is they sit there and go, well, there's lots of services we do. It's not about cost. And they've got that wrong, because it is partly about cost. If the default position in our industry is if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. So if you don't disclose the price of something, that's going to put people off in the first instance. But how can people determine value? This is where I cause the storm. But going back to the Vouched For research, they came up with the range of charges in the industry for advice and the average. Now, for podcast listeners, that's invaluable. I've done a piece previously where I said what I would pay, and when you compare it to what is in this research, it comes down towards obviously below average, but you see it's reasonable. I'm not just trying to screw them to the wall on their charges. Now, when they did the research, Vouched For found that six advisors charged a 5% initial fee for the advice that they were going to charge for people. 5%.
So just to get that straight, from my limited knowledge, and I'm coming from the angle of someone who's not in the industry as such, certainly not in investments, if someone's got £100,000 straight from the get-go, they're going to take 5,000 for themselves and say, thank you very much, that's mine.
Yep.
Wow.
There's no way to soften that, Andy. It is. Now, one of the arguments is that many of these people would use that towards the people with less money. So they would sit there and take the amount they would say it would cost to administer or advise anyway. And because the amount of money is small, therefore, as a percentage, it works out as 5%. But what you're saying is you're charging poorer people more for the same service you give richer people. There's something in, I understand maybe why if you work out the percentage, it can seem like that, but you've got to scratch your head as in the industry and think, yeah, I can see why. We've got to look at that. And this is where the advisors quoted their fees as a percentage. So some just actually have a flat rate. Now, of course, this is only a minority, so that's fine. But the fact they still exist and still get business, it's a problem, because the advisors where I cause a Twitter storm try to make out that, yeah, but those people won't get clients. Well, no, they do. And you've got to think, well, why do they? And it's because people don't know any different. Now, going on from that, 12 advisors charge 4% initial. I mean, wow. Now, the industry itself, there's some people out there who were very critical of this in the research piece. There's a guy called Martin Bamford. He does a podcast I've been on called Informed Choice. He's a bit of an innovator in the industry. He sometimes gets stick I think he doesn't deserve, partly because of jealousy. He try things, sometimes fails. I think it's a good thing. He called it out as pseudo commission because the people who charge percentage fees based on the asset are basically using something which was like commission that was banned under RDR, that Retail Distribution Review, where your commission was packaged up in the product and it was always a percentage of the amount you invested. That was banned. But what's happened, and some advisors and many have just gone, well, we'll charge you a fee, explicit, but it's 3% of the amount you invest. Well, just because it's not packaged up, it's still the same thing. And he called it pseudo commission, and he's bang on. There are other advisors, though, that tried to say, well, yeah, but as long as it was disclosed and the client agreed to it and it's clear, then that's fine. No, I'm not buying that. If your service is exceptional and the client knows they could get it cheaper, but the value you add is exceptional, get it. But I don't believe that will be the universal experience. Now, it also explains why we get people who have less money being excluded, because what they're going to do is people have to go for richer clients, because, I mean, a lot of people can't afford the fees of advisors. Now, I want to talk about the average hourly rate, just to give people some figures, right? So, the average hourly rate for an advisor in the industry ranged from the total range, so not the average, the total range was £125 an hour to £250 an hour. The average was £178. Now, when we're talking about this initial charge, if you're doing something that was investment, the lowest was 0.5% to the highest, which me and you have just choked on, which was 5%. It's a big difference. The average was 1.72%. The range for ongoing, so the trail commission, basically, the thing which they take every year to supposedly give you a service, ranged from 0% to 2%, with the average being 0.69. Now, of course, there were variations. Now, if you had £100,000 to invest, the average initial fee was 2.06% and the ongoing charge was 0.71. With £250,000, those dropped a bit, so the average was 1.56 for the initial charge, so that is, again, a hefty amount, and the ongoing was 0.69 as the ongoing. Now, you can still sit there and debate, why is there a difference? Why is it not standardised? Now, of course, I know that advisors have to take on the responsibility for their advice, so it costs. But what I put out on Twitter, which caused a bit of a storm, was I said, well, let's be honest, one of the problems, because this week there also was a piece of research that came out and said that 39% of people don't trust financial advisors. Now, financial advisors out there, whichever way you look at it, that's not good. And only 8% of people have sought advice in the last 12 months. Now, you need to know how many people needed advice. So that 8%, if only 8% needed it and all 8% and all of them went, then great. But obviously that's not the case. So you've got to take that figure and accept it's not in context. We don't know that how many people needed advice. It's one of the issues we have as an industry. We've got to be able to show people when they do and don't need advice, and it's something that I'm hell-bent on solving. But what I did is I pointed out to people on Twitter, said, look, the problem is customers don't know the value of advice. They don't see the value. They don't trust advisors. They see it as an open check because, like you say, it's not disclosed how much they might have to pay up front. They can't see that before they engage their services. Yes, it's absolutely disclosed when they have the advice. But I threw it out there to the guys on Twitter and they went at it like a dog with a bone. I said, what would happen if the advisors had to, when they disclosed it, say to people, this is the standardised, this is the industry average for the service I provided, the average cost, or encourage people to shop around, because it's happened with annuities and other broken parts of the industry that people had to shop around. Advisors said it's not the same thing. Well, the industry is broken, to be honest with you, because not enough people are getting advice. What if that fee was somehow set by the FCA? What it was, okay? So, therefore, when you sat down, Andy, with an advisor and he said, I'm going to charge you $2,000 for this, but the industry average is $1,000, you are forced there to evaluate the value of what this guy's giving you at the point before you tell him to enact it. So, also, the advisor has to be able to demonstrate the value. And I can tell you that when the world of before, when commission was around, before RDR, advisors didn't have to demonstrate value because it was perceived advice was free because it came from the product. The commission came from the product. In the post-RDR world, advisors generally don't have the ability to demonstrate the value they add. Now, the really good ones do. And there are loads of good ones, and those guys I champion. But as an industry, the problem is the advisors look at their world. They're so fragmented. They have a view that, well, we're all hard-working guys. I'm trying to save the industry that they've got that is going to disappear if they're not careful, because people don't value it. So you've got to be able to show ways of demonstrating that value. Wonky Bob above the hairdresser or whatever can demonstrate value to his clients, but then the most people don't go and see that advisor, so the perception is that advisors are not adding value. So therefore, if the industry were forced to show not just the good ones who are already doing it, what have they got to worry about? Everybody had to then become skilled at showing the value they added. What's the problem? It would also drive down the cost of advice, not ridiculously, but to a reasonable level. But it would also knock the sharks out of the industry. What is there not to like about the idea? Now, basically, go on Twitter, read the comments. There were advisors going, well, Burger King don't have to point out McDonald's do it cheaper, until I pointed out to the guy that likening a burger to advice is odd. And also, the metrics of value, what a burger costs, are all in the public domain. People know that. So the advice world, they don't. So people can't see the value that's been added. And as he pointed out, he goes, oh, well, that's the point of it is that clients will not see the value till after the event. And that is the issue, that people don't see the value of advice till afterwards. So we need to bring it to the front of the discussion so people are seeing it earlier and having to be demonstrated. I mean, what other walk of life will you say to someone, give me some money and I'm going to work some magic and then you're going to like this? You probably would be fairly sort of apathetic to that kind of offer, which is why one of the reasons people are still not engaging with advice. They can't afford it, so costs have to come down. I don't have the solution. I'm going to get there. We're going to do a lot with Money to the Masses to get there. But the point of this whole piece is to show people that the range of charges are quite wide, but armed with the right information, you can go in there and then you can determine value. And it's not about cheapest, it is about value. And the industry needs to work out that I'm all about value. I'm trying to champion what they do, but they're not making it easy because they sit there and say, well, why should I have to do that? No, because that's what the consumer wants. And so they need to stop being inward focusing and focus on the consumer. I mean, ultimately, I'd love to revolutionise this industry, and I would like to think that one day we will be able to. But in the meantime, there are great advisors out there. There are plenty of them. Get recommendations. We have things on our site to tell you how to find a good advisor. But it seems now there is starting to become evidence that you can use to work out how much you should start paying for financial advice, what constitutes value. And I think that is a great thing. And Vouch for may do price comparison. They're deciding whether to. Whether that is making people focus just on cost may not be a benefit, but what it would do, if the consumer's focusing on cost, then the industry has to respond by focusing on value. And that could be good. that could be good whether advisors like it or not. Before we move on, Andy, I just wanted to quickly mention 80/20 Investor. Now, 80/20 Investor is my DIY investment service. Do go and check it out. I empower and teach people how to invest their own money. The service provides data-driven fund tables. The data is driven by my own unique 80/20 Investor algorithm, which I created. You also get stop-loss alerts, you get research articles and insight, you get market commentaries, monthly commentaries, and DIY investment lessons, but you also get access to my £50,000 portfolio, which is a portfolio of my own money, which I run live on the site for members to see, and it shows people how I use the service to maximise my returns. And in the first 2 years of doing so, I turned £50,000 into £59,500, which is a 19% return, beating investment managers, professional fund managers, financial advisors, investment banks, passive trackers and the market. So everybody can have a free 30-day trial of 80/20 Investor, and you can claim that by going to moneytothemasses.com and going and clicking on the 80/20 Investor hyperlink at the top of the page. So go and try the service. Let me know what you think of it, and I know from the feedback that you're going to love it. But for now, on with the show.
Okay, so Damien, you're going to explain why we shouldn't be setting up payments to our friends, family, associates, anybody with comical stuff written on the bank statements on the subject line. So what's going on here?
Well, I like the idea. Like I said, I had a friend do it to me years ago, and I've probably done similar things. I'm just as have my
immature.
Yeah, as the rest of us. I like to have a sense of humour about life. Life is far too serious. But when it comes to mortgages, there has been evidence. It was in a national paper this week. It probably passed many people by. It was a small story of somebody being refused a mortgage because of the references that were on their bank statements. And when you apply for a mortgage providers can ask for up to 6 months, even 12 months statements to assess affordability, your level of income, your conduct, which is about whether you have any bounce direct debits, your lifestyle, and your credit commitments. So they need all that, and that's how they decide whether to your risk level and whether to lend to you. This person was actually turned down due to inappropriate language on their statement, and
wow.
they had a swear word on there, and I that made me laugh. But it just shows that underwriters aren't famed for their sense of humour. And so putting things like a reference of drugs and things like that on your reference can mean that when an underwriter goes through their statements, they don't have any context of the fact that you're absolutely hilarious. They just see the fact that you've got money going out for drugs to another account, so they will just question it. So when it comes to mortgages these days, since the rules changed a few years back, where it's all about assessing affordability and it's slightly stricter criteria, then they don't give them any reason to not lend to you. So unfortunately, a sense of humour doesn't exist in the financial services industry. So don't do it, but keep having fun.
Good, and we're nearly finished. Before we go, you said earlier in the podcast you might do a very quick piece on interest rates. Have we got anything on that?
Yeah, I just want to mention the interest rate decision this week that happened. So it's June decision, June 2018. Now, there was a 3% chance it became that the rates would go up. Obviously, they didn't go up. And then there was a 60% chance they'd go up in August. And those things always change. And the one thing that I said online this week, the only certainty is 100% chance the market will get it wrong, because they've got it wrong for the last, since 2009, when interest rates were slashed down to 0.5%. They never can correctly predict when rates will go up. What was interesting, the reason I just mention it, is that although the rates didn't go up, that was expected. What was surprising was the split of the votes. So when you see there were 9 people on the Monetary Policy Committee, they're the people, the men and women who sit down, have a chinwag for a day or two, and then say, right, we're going to vote. Who votes the rates are going to go up, stay the same, or go down? And it's a majority vote. And people expect it to be 7-2. 7 people vote for maintaining them where they are, 2 for going up. That's what it was before. But it became 6-3. Now, that's a little bit more nudge towards the going up, hike in rates camp. Nothing crazy, but what made it interesting was who the person was who dissented, which is the term. It was the chief economist, and the chief economist is the person who has the fingers in all the pies of the economic data for the Bank of England. Now, the chief economist has not once in the last 7 years gone against the majority. And so this was the first time in 7 years that the chief economist, the guy who seems to have his fingers in all the pies in terms of data, which is what really drives whether and when the Bank of England will change interest rates, he decided to go against the crowd and say, he actually put his hand up, I think rates should be going up. That was quite interesting. So it does suggest that we will see a rate rise possibly this year. That's what I'm chucking out there. You can read into tea leaves far too much, but it's just an interesting anecdote from not the actual decision, but the meetings and how it occurred.
Good. If you want to get in touch with Damien, please do so. It's at moneytothemasses with a number 2, or you can email Damien at moneytothemasses.com or podcast at moneytothemasses.com. They both get to him. If you want to review the podcast, please do. We're getting lots of reviews through. We do read the reviews out on the podcast, so if you'd like to get your name read out, we'd really appreciate it. It sends us flying up the charts, which means we can help more people. So get onto iTunes and do that whenever you can. Will be much appreciated. Damien, we're done until next week.
Until next week.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.